Tuen tim nye tin dala nye dara nam da ra sa la we che nye den ge chi shin ne sen chi re nye ge tu ga ra le ban zin Kanda se be chun ra ra ma re me thong ma dung a ge se re we Cho cho kong la pu che taran se yan la dung che yang de song Zhu dara che zhu nyun mo nyi lo le je chang zhu tu zi che Hari man se le dung a la nyun go che nye che ze ral di nam Duen hen da jin san ju taran sun ne yuan den lu zo jia sen tu wen gu Chu chai chu dai chu nian gen de ta le men se le chang bi yan la du o ma ra ba zan na de o ma ra ba zan na de o ma ra ba zan na de o ma ra ba zan Marabazana deo 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 marabazana de O marabazana de o marabazana de Tseden jen ken rabo serenje tale timo memba ran salane kadan tenje shun lo tomba ye lo je pombe nan wa zalan do solo Kongse tawara de pam chung se te wara de na yang Gombo jamya chen ne keng me pa yang tong wa ra shu Nin je chen be tu de ning me shen song ne me lam chen bo ngap ja ta pe ga ra da ngan chen de chir me do Dun ba tu je chen la cha ca lo u je chong long pe me dong bo le jia lu nam du la rang shen lun je du Tenzo peche yunden chompan wa pe ma jung ne talo pe choro e jung Lulu tome ariya dewa dan inye cholang chönje tabe shab Yunden yue dan shaje yue la so Gendo chone nam la solo wa debe Ma we senge kange ribe me Sedere long ne chang zeng kun se jang Chambe pal joro tuziri kunye pa Rong som chöje sangbo chale joro e che Kāngri tui kāla rinche nyingbi kolo yunden kunjung kāwe ye tsaradu Nyingbi dundo bebe nanjuro pa longchen ramsham shabla solo wa debe Ridong jambala shunu chila le kongbe longne pobe derje dol Londo chuzun jangzu ngawang juro mi pam jamyang namja la solo wa debe Tongmin cheje inje podang ne dusum sanje kunje ngobo nye Ransom Chagoro Munsum Donze Pa Tsawe Lame Shabla Solowa De Teyang Jowa Namke Tada Nyambe Simje Tamje Dungal Junde Nyedan Dalde Topja Laname Pa Yang Dakpara Zobe Sanje Je Kopang Rimbo Che La Kopara Kiwo Te Chedu Tambi Che Tenye Senje Tsulshindo Nyamsu Langwara Kiwo Nyambe Samba Changju Shodo Tuje Pa Rimbo Che Salta Bigbo Ne Simbara Shu Gang Simbara Chawe Choge Rimba Ni Kebe Tsula Jubingo She Chawe Tenje Tenye Yimbare Dila Kebara Chawe Ne Chu Choge Tomshi Soso Yang Dakpe Rikpa Shi Ingune Yobane Tambo Kebara Chawe Ne Chu Dila yang ane pungbo kam geche dendel netan nemin wangbo dus ne shuti ne tanda kaspa batela demba la kebas demba dela yang ane demba shir tang ne batang demba shi kola reres ne yongge yo bale dungal ge demba da kunjung ge demba de shutu ne gopa shoot sene shiba lamge tempe kapla lepte yus.
So at the beginning of class, please give rise to bodhicitta, thinking, may all sentient beings, who are as numerous as the sky is vast, attain the state that is free from suffering and the causes for suffering. May all those sentient beings achieve the state of a perfect and complete Buddha, perfect awakening. And in order to facilitate that for sentient beings, may I now study and then put the teachings correctly into practice. With that kind of motivation, please engage in your studies. The text that we're studying is the Gateway to Knowledge. The treatise entitled The Gate for Entering the Way of a Pandita by Jamgon Mipam Rinpoche. And generally the text is outlined by 3 main sections. First come the 10 topics of expertise, then the 4 seals of Dharma, and finally the fourfold correct discrimination. We're currently discussing the first one of those, the 10 topics of expertise. And we have already covered a number of those topics: the aggregates, the elements, the sense sources, interdependence, the correct and the incorrect, the faculties, time. And currently we're discussing the 8th topic, which is the topic of the truths. And after a more general discussion of the essence of the truth and the number and the order of the 4 noble truths, then we are discussing each of the noble truths individually. And we already covered the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, and also the truth of cessation. And today we will continue with the truth of the path.
람기 덴바니 람강기 동아르 용수 셰바 람강게스는 람기 덴바히는 람기 덴바 디기스 드네 야공도 슈심바 동아르기 덴바세 동아르기 덴바델라 친유게 직된 직당 남주기 심진기 꼴라 드네 셰바라 온테 동알 람기 덴바델라 아니 냠렌다 람기 덴바델라 랍종 드네 치tum나 동알기 덴바 용수 셰바당스 동알기 덴바콜라 다나신 군중기 덴바세 야간라 군중 레케 미겔라 소바당 아니 사체 사메 레라 소바당 아니 녀몽 받된 졸라더니 녀몽 남랑 망보당 지레군 에와 망고 중송 어딘조 어딘조 시기레스 어딘조 군중 된조 시에네 군중대 뽕투규레스 동알 시에투바 람게 덴바델라 텐네 군중대 뽕투 군중 레다 녀몽데 뽕예라 람게 덴바레 텐그 군중 뽕와스 고방문도 제바 되네 고바디 콜라 야간나지 망고시도사 어디 고바대양 되네 문도 유르투와데 다 람라 텐네 용그레스 문도 제비 치르 딜라 텐네 하네 람데 곰스 람 곰바르차스 네 베나 동알 셰바르차 군중 뽕와르차 고방문도차 다 람규라 텐나 람 곰바르차스 다 람곰 곰고레스 곰바르차데스 곰바르차데 곰바르차데 간디앙 간데스네스나 데라 촉조르 통곰 타르친게 람가 유베스 다데 람데라 에나 안에 다 람게 쳔예 다우데 간스나 데 동알 시에토바 군중빵토바 고봉문도 제토바 딘데레도 되네 람게 에와데나 촉람단 조람단 통람 안에 곰람 타르침비 람나 유스 데데 마림바 신도 당보 촉람니 그래서
So we have reached the truth of the path within the presentation, and within that the presentation of the 5 paths. So chapter 12 on page 143. And the chapter starts with the following: the truth of the path is by means of a particular path to fully understand suffering, to relinquish its origin, and to cultivate that path in order to realize cessation. So when we speak about the truth of the path, how do we define it, or what is the truth of the path? The path is that which makes it possible that we truly understand the truth of suffering. So this goes back to what we have seen before. The truth of suffering is describing the vessel, the world, and its content, sentient beings. And to completely know that, to completely come to apprehend the truth of suffering, the path is necessary. Also, to completely relinquish its origin, the truth of origin, which constitutes karma and afflictive emotions. We spoke about origin in terms of different forms of karma: virtuous, non-virtuous, neutral, defiled, undefiled, and so forth. And also in terms of the afflictive emotions. We saw many different classifications and divisions of the afflictive emotions. All of those need to be known, and then particularly they need to be abandoned. So the truth of origin is that which needs to be abandoned or relinquished. And the path is that which makes that possible. And then the truth of cessation is that which needs to be actualized, that's what needs to be manifested or realized. And so the path is the path to the realization and actualization of the truth of cessation. So therefore, it's the path that needs to be cultivated. And this here reflects actually the 4 instructions about the 4 noble truths. The truth of suffering is to be known. The truth of origin is to be relinquished. The truth of cessation is to be realized or actualized. And the truth of the path is to be cultivated. And so that is the definition, really, or the essence of the truth of the path. And how is then the path presented? It is presented in terms of the 5 paths. In this regard, there are 5. The path of accumulation, of joining, of seeing, of cultivation, and of consummation. So the last one is also called the path of no more learning, right? So here now we see the divisions, the different parts to the truth of the path. So the first paragraph was addressing the essence, what the truth of the path actually is, and then the second path is describing the classifications or the different parts of the truth of the path. So we have the 5 paths here, and those we will address gradually, one by one, starting with the path of accumulation.
촉람니 다 촉람세 촉스는 망보게 된다라고 되네. 촉람 갑라 되네. 다 마음바나 토백이 연된 말이 탐적이 시도 차유베나 촉람스 되네. 다다양 촉람 갑라 되네. 소남 당 되네. 소남 개와 소남 된조 망보지 되네. 주 촉여바다 촉람 갑라다 소남 망보 쌓고게요래 마음바나 토백이 연대 마리바 탐지기 시도게 시니도 차대요래 디 연대 망보기 시인베나 촉람스 되네 단다양 소남 체메바 망보지기 쌓게 여베나 촉람스 디 나마레스고래 된 촉람 되네 간데나 안에 랑데 장축숨레 강되발라 믹네세 나 촉람데 라랍디 갑데라 랑기 되고 년퇴게 장축 랑산제게 장축 라나메바 조비 산제게 장축 디 장축숨 강롱라 믹네세 네 믹네 안에 강도라 믹네스 디 문데라다 초글람 갑라 당보 내중 당 로도 넘버 신고 당보다 로도 넘버 신인 거 쭉로라 체데 미류데 달주르 녀버까와 아니 녀나양 아니 미다바 임바 아니 레준데데 루아 메바 임바 아니 코르와데 동알기 당신 임바 데 코르와 동알기 당신들 탈고에도 삼백건데 시중네 로도 넘버 수기 시중네 코르와들 탈송나 되니 탈와 탈 코르와 탑사데 아니 년대기 고방 톱고도 코르와들 탈네 코르와들 탈네 랑산제기 고방 톱고도 데이터 코르와들 탈네 야나 라나메바 양도 노블 산제지 고방도 톱고도 삼네 로도 넘버시 줄라 깨네 되네 랑데 정주송 강롱데라 더발라 믹네 코르와데 동알레도 년대 고방 톱나 치마롱 코르와데 동알레도 코르와레 탑네 랑겔게 장주 코르와데 탄라나메바 장주 톱나 치마롱세 더발라 믹네 믹네 데이 귤바스 디 장주쌤 강롱식이 강롱 순보 강롱들라 강들라 믹바이나 데 탐제기 귤라 귤바데 강을에서나 개와스 개와 진바당와 추림송과 미개와 주방과 개와 주주바 나 된데서 개와 신당스 아니 제부 대톱제기 퇴섬 건배다 년퇴기 고방 톱 고건나라도 랑산지 고방 톱 고나라도 라나메 바양당보 로비 산지 고방 톱 고나라도 제부 대톱제기 대톱을 잡으치더라 퇴섬 검순게 시랍된 거래 소람 갑라 퇴바 센티네데 년퇴기 장주기 꼴라 촉족당 람랄롭당 년퇴기 고방 톱당 양배샤샤나 년 랑결기 나타나시 다나시 라나메 방향도 조비 산지 고방이는 딘도 탐제라 되네 냠네 당보 냠네 지당 꼴라 퇴 슝당 아니 맹아당 강에 탐제 퇴디 바도 삼바치 타마 곰데 퇴섬 곰숨지 시랍데 땡겨요레 소랑 갑라 시랍당 that's
So if we now then look at the path of accumulation, the path of accumulation is to focus on whichever of the three respective fruitions of enlightenment one may desire while possessing the causes for that. Other types of merit, the discipline of an ordinary being, as well as the knowledge of learning, reflection, and meditation, which enables one to attain this result. So, what do we identify as the path of accumulation? First of all, accumulation means it's many things together, many things being accumulated together, an aggregation of many things. And so here this means actually that is the manifold causes for all the qualities that will manifest later. So it's the basis for all the qualities, this path of accumulation. And so while one is on the path of accumulation, one gathers merit, which makes it then possible to manifest the qualities later. So when one gathers all the accumulations, when one gathers a lot of merit, accumulation of merit, and then the immeasurable merit that one accumulates on the path of cultivation, on the path of accumulation, leads them to the possibility of the higher paths and the qualities of realization further on. And how does one start out on this path of accumulation? Actually, first of all, one needs to focus on a particular result. So one needs to have an aim in mind of a particular result. And it can be either of the three results. It can be the result of arhatship, the result of a partaker Buddha arhatship, or the result of becoming a perfect and complete Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. So having any either of these three results as one's aim, one then engages in the path of accumulation. Now, in order to really hold one of these three results as one's objection in mind, one first needs to develop renunciation, and in particular, one needs to rely on the four mind changings. So first one needs to contemplate on the fact that the precious human body endowed with the freedoms and advantages is very difficult to obtain. And then the second mind changing, even though one might have obtained it, one needs to reflect on the fact that it is something that is really fleeting, something very impermanent, and death is easy to come. The third contemplation is then that karma, cause and effect are actually unfailing. And the fourth reflection is that on the nature of samsara, which is actually suffering. So having contemplated the four mind changings, one sees the necessity to be liberated from samsara. And where to, that is then depends on the individual. Some people aspire towards being liberated themselves from samsara, so they aspire towards arhatship. Others want to become a partaker Buddha, and again others aspire towards perfect and complete enlightenment for all beings. And so the basis for even taking either of these three results as one's focus, as one's aim, is to really contemplate and give rise to the four mind changings. When we really contemplate that, then we want to be free from samsara. We see the necessity of becoming free from samsara and gain an attitude that it's really not okay to keep being stuck there. And so whichever of the three minds of enlightenment, so whichever of the three results one aspires to, so whichever of the three types of mind of towards enlightenment one might give rise to, that results in the practice of virtue. So when one aspires to, with conviction, to either of the three types of results, then one will practice virtue, one will practice generosity, discipline, one will adopt the 10 virtues and refrain from the 10 non-virtues. And so how does one go about this then? Not only does one engage in some discipline, so one gathers some different kinds of merit, one engages in the discipline of an ordinary being, and then one also relies on the knowledge of learning, reflection, and meditation. So on the path of accumulation, one then relies on either of the instructions that lead to the result that one aspires towards. So whether one wants to become an arhat, a Shravaka Arhat, a Partaker Buddha Arhat, or a perfect Buddha, one first needs to listen to and study the instruction on the practice, the different texts, the different oral instructions, and instructions of the teacher, advice of the teacher, and then contemplate on all of that and finally take it into practice by cultivation. So one relies on the wisdom that emerges from listening, the wisdom or the knowledge that comes from reflection, and the knowledge that comes from meditation.
소소 기회 출짐당 템베 초람 예갑라 되네 연된 탐제게 시도 주로바 아니 예조된베 출짐스 딱 소사르게 강롱제 랑네세 양나 개롱 마 양나 안에 개출 양나 개출마 안에 양나 개년 양나 안에 년에 어디로 진던 발랑 거니 수수교 출림난 덴베스 왕배 고dom신 세기 최셰바당 선 초람기 갑라 니 미기 왕보 나이 왕보 라소보 왕보 된조 숙이도 왕와 쇼라 람상직라 도차바당 숙이도 명와나 람상도 시단계와당 난 잔년바나 람상기 아니 영송와당 자민년바나 양 시단계와 라소보 된저기 다 도르나 왕보기 고든조 담신 센터 돈발랑이 고네 디 왕보기 고 담신 다 세계 최셰바 센터 된저양 지 사마하장 망라나 되니 니코와당 퇴삼 검수 야고지마도와 양 사마하장게 용용 칼라하장게 용용 사마마사나 저것도 손이야 퇴삼 검수 나서 지미도와 딘데 임발라 때네 되네 세계 최림바 최셰바당선의 최림보르 셰바 사마딩딩 따다로 간다 네 남게 차트 메라 미냐르와 소사 다데 지금 쇼방아 상상네 야랑네 퇴섬 검숨 라소바 세모치우바도 퇴섬 검숨 라소바 딘데 지역이 꼴라 남게 차트스는 쇼방아 상상 메스네 람나 세모치우바도라 치상 되네 최 지금 퇴섬 검숨 라소 어딘데 지에마도 양 쇼바 치우바도 냐레 공무양 하정게 조고 냐르와라서 어딘데 미냐르와서 기스 디데스 거네 초람발라 전고별에 숨어래도 전기레스
So when it says here regarding the causes for the path of accumulation that one engages in other types of merit, the discipline of an ordinary being, as well as the knowledge of learning, reflection, and meditation, which enables one to attain this result. Here, the discipline of an ordinary being actually contains a few different things. So it pertains to the discipline of the individual liberation uphold the discipline of a monk, a fully ordained monk or nun, of a nun in training, novice monk or novice nun, or of a male or female householder, or the temporary vows. Any of those are included in the discipline of an ordinary being. But other things that are included in that discipline of an ordinary being are also the control of one's sense doors, for example, that one doesn't get distracted and influenced by the sense stimulus that one might encounter, so that one controls the mind, that one doesn't straight away get attached to and desirous of any beautiful thing that one sees, or if something ugly appears, that one straight away is disgusted and has revulsion against it, or if one hears some pleasant sound, that the mind gets distracted by it straight away, and an unpleasant sound to be averse to straight away. So the one type of this discipline of an ordinary being is to not completely get lost in the reactionary way of relating to the sense objects. And then another point is that one has a balanced lifestyle in terms of diet and as well in terms of sleep. So keeping a balanced diet means that one doesn't eat too much, because that would make one sleepy, and one doesn't eat too little, because if the body is weak, then one cannot engage in the studies, in one's studies, reflection and meditation either. So a balanced diet, and then last point, sleep is to not lie down in the first part of the night and in the last part of the night. That means that one should not wake up too late or go to bed too early, because that time is also to be used for study, reflection, and meditation. So one will observe one's practice of study, reflection, and meditation as the last part of the evening, the first part of the night, and then starting again in the morning. If one sleeps in all the time until really late, that one will not be studying, reflecting, and meditating. And if one goes to bed like really early, then one won't study, reflect, and meditate either. So those constitute the discipline of an ordinary being.
대충 촉시 대충 촉시단 덴비고네스 속기 라이드고라 대충 촉시 당 덴비고네스 드네 람라 드네스네 쯩 보레스네 드네스 마레도 드네 디체라 템바 조 안에 초람 예갑데라 드네 템바 냐와르 샤파시 아니 근데 곰네 템바냐마르 샤파시 간데 임바디 고라 곰신 나주르스네 간데 임바 다랑라 데네 준비 지신 시신도 네비고네 네 템바냐마르 샤파시 당 텐졸라 퇴선 건숨 나수발라 몬바르 가와스네가라 쪼와 데데 치고레스 템바냐마르 샤파시 아니야 시신 다조 다 템바냐마르 샤파시 데 템바 마체 와치네 디 내술 간데 임바테신도 전통의 디면의 시신다기도 마르카오세 주 대다기스 몬바르 토파 남당 남바르 타르비 내지 네도 줘데세 다야 공도 계속 가시시로서 로도 남바 신인 고중네 템바냐마르 샤파시 라소바당 데네 시신당 데 야강라 계속 마무치도 디도 교대달라기스 통남기 갑라 몬바르 똑바 딘데 토비에당 데네 산제 장교 선반 남제 남타르 라소바든 저 탐제 중화기 뇌암 신유도 그렇게 제스 유데스.
So one then endeavors in the practice of cultivating the 4 applications of mindfulness and takes delight in remaining alert by means of controlling the sense doors, keeping a balanced diet, not lying down during the first and the last part of the night, and so forth. So if one first endeavors on the path of accumulation, then the causes for that, the causes for taking one of the 3 results as one's goal, are the ones that were just mentioned, including also to have little desires and a lot of contentment with what one has. And in that way then to engage in the path, strive in the path. And the main practice that one will engage in then on the path of accumulation is that of the 4 applications of mind training. The 4 close applications of mindfulness, I'm sorry. So exactly the way that the instructions have been laid out, then one engages in the practice of the 4 close applications of mindfulness and guards one's mind with vigilant introspection to check again and again that one does not stray from the correct application of the practice. So to summarize again, first one needs to rely on the 4 mind changings to then endeavor to achieve any of the 3 types of results, which then leads to an accumulation of merit through the practices, through accumulation of merit, and then the disciplines like the ones that were mentioned, accumulation of merit, controlling one's sense doors and so forth, as well as the actual practice of the 4 applications of mindfulness. And in that way, one really becomes a suitable vessel for the qualities of true realization and the emancipations. So these previously mentioned things are the causes, the prerequisites that are needed to become a vessel for the qualities of the Dharma.
Nönye du jurde ta lam kongma ya kangdu lodo namba shigi shi chungne sungne la te taw nyamlen cheba la tenne ne lam kongma jolam la sopa tobegi nönye du an jurdes ne zo chewa de choglam chumur jemba nyawar shakpa shi kumba ngombar kongdu paades 초람 데라 초람 충무 초람 딩 쳔보스네 데에 요사리도와 초람 충충 갑라 레 동고바 갑라 템바냐와 샤바 시데 곰고베레 수마네 류 템바냐와 샤바 초르와 템바냐와 샤바 셈 템바냐와 샤바 쳬 템바냐와 샤바 인세 템바냐와 샤바 시데 류 템바냐와 샤바 스는 랑기 류단 신기 류치 chi bakba kangla la soba da nang ning kalma la soba nangrol tinzo lyunga ta la korongi tseni de khanda yoresena dulchen mangbo sakpa la tenne luiseng ji 공부 ji 통화 잠마 도비 luiseng ko dulchen ma sakpa ko rangshingji 공부지 매와 아무튼 tin데 랑기 tseni da 지 tsенye 류디 미다바이 랑신 유르데기 랑신지 아니 류디라 때네 되네 류코롱 동알기 랑신지 되네 도도양 딜레장 고와 삽도는 동비 랑신 동반 얘기 랑신지 되네 다음에 봐 랑신 어디네 진이 초람갑라 슝룩 도대 된줄라 퇴삼 검순 준비고네 되네 점반야버 샤고 시디기 고와 된데스네 렙네 아니 된줄라 양양양 삼로 된데 땅에 총놈 중국 갑라 점반야버 샤고 시 곰신 아니 곰방 문도 공도 팍 어디네스네 총놈 중국 갑라 된데 남규레스 숨으래
So through these causes, one becomes a suitable vessel for the qualities of true realization and the emancipations. So through the causes for the path of accumulation and then the practice of the path of accumulation, the development of the qualities of the path of accumulation, then leads to the becoming a vessel for the other paths, for becoming a vessel for the path of joining and so on, the path of seeing, the path of accumulation, and the path of no more learning. So all of that starts out with the 4 mind changings and the other things that we have just enumerated. And then we divide the path of accumulation actually into 3 parts. The lesser path of accumulation, the middling path of accumulation, and the higher path of accumulation, or the greater path of accumulation. And so on the lesser path of accumulation, the training in the 4 applications of mindfulness becomes further advanced. So one further cultivates here the application of the practice of the 4 applications of mindfulness. So prior to the path of accumulation, one has already developed that a little bit, and now one further advances that practice. When we speak of the 4 accumulations, no, when we speak about the 4 close applications of mindfulness on the lesser path of accumulation, then these are the application of mindfulness of the body, of feeling, of the mind, and of phenomena. And so rather than just generally addressing those, generally training in mindfulness regarding the body here, then one goes into more detail. One practices the close application of mindfulness to the body of oneself and the bodies of others, the inner aspects and the outer aspects of the body. So, for example, outer would be one's limbs or one's skin, and the inner aspects of the body that one can pay close mindfulness towards are then the organs like the heart or the lungs that one observes. And as one observes the inner and outer aspects of the body with a lot of mindfulness, then one actually understands, one comes to know that these are just an accumulation, gathering together of many different parts, all the way to smallest indivisible particles, like smaller and smaller parts and particles that then constitute the body. There's not a single thing to be found that can be identified as the body, as a body as such. But so through the close application of mindfulness to the body, one can see that we can break it down into further and further parts. Each part, again, is constituted of different parts and so on. So one sees that the body is not a single unit, a singular unit. And also based on that, then one can see that the different sensations that are being experienced constitute or show the fact that the body is impermanent. So the body underlies constant change, and then one can also understand that what one experiences based on that body is actually suffering, and also that it's empty of a true nature and that it's selfless. So all of that can be understood based on the practice of the 4 applications of mindfulness, or here the example of the application of mindfulness to the body first. And so on the lesser path of accumulation, one goes into more and more detail with regard to these 4 applications of mindfulness by again and again reading different texts, receiving different instructions, and relating those back to the practice of the 4. So whatever one learns, whatever one studies, one relates that back to one's practice of the 4 applications of mindfulness and contemplates in that way.
Solam chungu gala temba nyawara shapas, lu temba nyawara shapa na shingi, chorwa temba nyawara shapa, chorwa dewa yana yang gyutroge yoba, gyurbi dungal girang shin, chorwa dungal yana, dungal girang shin, chorwa tangyum yana, ane kyapa tuji dungal, chorwa inza tam제, chorwa katso yana mena tam제 de dungal sungirang shin imba nyodo temba nyawara shapa. Sem tembar nyabra shapas sem de da samlo 가초에 망보 코르기요나 딘조 탐제 아니 메다바 임바 삼로 가서 가리코나 딱바라 디랑 되게 말아 양 디제나 삼로 신베 코르기데 양 삼로 신베 코르기데 메다바당 동바당 동알와당 다메베랑 신 임바 셈데야 다나신 최트만 여러 샤바스 군인 코르비 군중기 덴바당 동알기 덴베게 최든조 탐제당 아니 남장 양대 람나게 뒤바당 근데 최대 강다 강인 받은 저 탐제 뭐라 동바 다음에바 딘데기 상신 인반이도 젬바다 퇴삼 검순치니 안데 딘절라 젬바 녀바르 샤기레스 순간에 초글람 충미 갑나 아 젬바 녀바르 샤바시 곰바 ngombar kongdo phakte se ngombar kongdo phakte ngoma choglam chungla lamla mashu kabla ane tetao lu chorwa sem chö de timanya ora shaba tindege samlo dang lobchung tinza ka ha gu ge mani tadanda choglam chungla shukne timanya ora shaba shila lobchung tinde samlo dang de kala samlo ngoma de le jang tanda ngondo kongdo phakte se ngombar phakte o tinde sni yongire sumare.
So likewise, as the practitioner is on the path of accumulation, practices the close application of mindfulness to the body, likewise, they then also practice the close application of mindfulness to feeling. So with the increasing knowledge through studying and reflecting and meditating, then one also understands that all the sensations, all the feelings that arise, may they be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, they all constitute suffering. So the practitioner here understands then that when the observed sensation is pleasure, then that is actually the suffering of change. When the sensation that is experienced in one's mindfulness is that of discomfort or suffering, then this is the suffering of suffering. And if neutral sensation is experienced, then that is the all-pervasive suffering of being compounded. And so whatever sensation is experienced, whatever sensation is observed, may it be pleasurable, suffering, or neutral, all of them actually constitute the nature of suffering. They're all suffering. And then in the close application of mindfulness on the mind, one can understand that whatever one thinks, all these constantly changing thoughts, the different thoughts that pop up just in very rapid succession, they really show us how impermanent everything is, how impermanent our mind is in terms of how the thoughts change, how attitudes change, how all the engagement with the objects constantly changes. So we have a different thought now, and then another one yet now, and yet another one. So all of that is demonstrating impermanence. And then the close application of mindfulness on Dharma, that really investigates all phenomena, whether they are the phenomena of the truth of suffering, so of complete, of thorough affliction, or the phenomena of complete purification. In any case, all phenomena are empty and selfless, is what one can understand from the application of mindfulness on the Dharma. So when it says here that on the lesser path of accumulation, the training of the 4 applications of mindfulness becomes further advanced, that means that before one has engaged in the path, so prior to the path of accumulation, one might have dabbled a little bit in the practice of the 4 applications of mindfulness. But now that one actually relies on the different scriptural sources, the different instructions, then one's knowledge increases and one's practice increases as one applies that to the knowledge to one's practice. So now one knows more and more and becomes more and more aware.
네, 딩불 양다 뽕와 시스 랑신게 준주 중화당스 초글람 딩갑라 야네 양다 뽕와 시스나 미게와 게와 된조 아니 미게와 뽕 미게와 마게와 된조라 미게와 마게를 주바 아니 개와 마게바 된조 개와 깨도 주바 개와 깨와 된조라 개와 공니 공도 벨와 디시고디 밀라 양다 뽕와 시스 디게 랑신신게 준주 점이레스 초람 딩감라 드네 초람 쳔벽갑라 주출기 강바시 냠내 용게레스 숭아레라 랑신신게 띵예제 주출기 강바시 듬비 주출기 강베 띵예진 준주기 준주기 주출기 강바 쩌바 주출기 강바 셈베 띵예진기 주출기 강바스 디라오시네 초글람 침벽갑라 오텐데스는 주출기 강바시 띵예지 중모스
On the medium path of accumulation, an exertion with the nature of the four correct endeavors occurs. So when one reaches then the medium path of accumulation, the second stage there, then one practices the four correct endeavors. The four correct endeavors are to make sure that non-virtue that has not arisen will not arise. So to prevent any non-virtue that is not yet there from arising, and to abandon or stop or discard all non-virtue that already has arisen. So to first prevent non-virtue that's not yet there from arising. Then the second one is to abandon the non-virtue that's already there. And then number 3 is to ensure that virtue that has not yet arisen will arise. And then number 4 is to ensure that virtue that has already arisen will increase. So those are the 4 correct endeavors, what one needs to endeavor in practice here, or put into practice, exert oneself in. So that's the medium path of accumulation. And then the greater path of accumulation constitutes of the practice of the 4 legs of miracles, miraculous display. And so on the greater path of accumulation, a concentrated state with the nature of the 4 legs of miracles will take place. These 4 legs of miracles are intention, diligent attention, and discernment.
저르비 람네 촉람도 셰비 된라 공필도 베베 아니 단 저람 세티갈라 아니 뎀바 춘이기 뎀바데 다 통남라 춘이기 뎀바 문순도 통화대 딜라다 뇨 저르와 치싱스 아니 타르발라다 촉람 톱툼나 되네 코랄라르게 그게 말아 디제네 타르발라 드베게 시 다우제 메체나 조람스 다 춘이기 덴바 문순도 통해라 참 조르겐다우 치게 예베나 조람스 디다 조람데네 촉람도 다 약간 촉람 콜라 망고지 숭숭 어디 촉람도 히에베 된된조라 되네 약게 공필도 땅네 베바스 녜버제비 차다 튠비 개자스 단다디 촉람되기 민라 수남 차튠기 개와스 아니 단다디 직들라 졸람기 개와들라 녜제 차튠 녜버제비 차다 튠바스 녜버제바스 Nepal chibasnata jorlam la lepsa vichina tene 파 통람 토비엘라 되니 지 뉴스 바당 참저바당 통람 토베 연샥상라고 어디데기 개와 인송하래 다디 토람 jorlam 갑지 개와 된도 딤베천이 코이명라 네버집에 차도 준비께자 남세 토바데세 다 강시나세 jorlam 갑라 네버집에 차도 준비께자 된도 토비레라 안에 초lam 그 개와 된도 공필도 당기래라라 다디 간데레세나세 조화 속 시오 센터디 만들기도 주 제모 서바 최적 센터디 시도와 양 단다 촉람라 촉람 중앙 딩 첨보 라와 당신치네 졸람데라 양 조화 속 시선 시유 주 제모 오늘 서바 최적 선 시유선 대양 당보다 조화되는 세 소소랑기 덴반 남라 산다 소소랑기 촉람 촉람라데 터섬 콘숨 라소바다 촉람 겁라 냠내 망부지 계제도와 디 냠내 된조 지 터섬 콘숨 야고 제네 아니 덴바 남라 산다 덴바시기 내룩 된조라라는 동갈된 내룩 타테 덴바시기 내룩 된조라 세드네 칸데 임바틴데기 나와 톱지 띵엔 젠당스 셈세주데 네비 차네 띵엔 젠당스 히랍스나 디 내룩데 칸데 임바 하고위 차네 아니 셰랍스 띵이전다 셰랍니 냠도 충바르 덴바데스 되니 통람기 이시 메타위 드토바오 다디 민라 졸람 갑라다 당보 드싱 이제 토베 디 드드스는 가나 메데 뇨뇽뇽뇽레베가라 드지레비도 온디 난신치네 통람기 이시 빼샤샤나 메 난신이나 다딜라 녀루 도게요 발라 되네 드토바오 센디네 드리갑라 통 jorlam de la da odin des ne yung gyore sungane da di lam kurung ge dolan lam tarchin dang ge lam kurung ge nyam daw chö daw je redwa de toba o
So then we move on to the path of joining, the second of the 5 paths. And the path of joining is described in the following way. At the path of joining, by endeavoring to further enhance the points explained as the path of accumulation, one acquires the virtuous roots for the 4 factors conducive to insight, that is, heat and so forth, summit, acceptance, and supreme attribute. So, on the path of joining, one comes close to the direct realization, the direct seeing of suchness, the direct perception of the Four Noble Truths, of the way how things are. So it's called the path of joining because it's like the joining, the joint between the previous part where one doesn't have the realization, and then the path of seeing, which is the first instant of seeing the truth, of direct realization. And so it's like the basis for the direct realization then to take place. And so since it is the precursor to that direct realization, it's like the joining point that connects one to the direct realization. And as one comes closer and closer to the direct realization, then one gets a feel for it already, or one gets one gets a taste of it already. One gets a little bit of an impression of the direct realization on the path of seeing already. So first of all, what one does on the path of joining is that one continues to improve the qualities that one has developed on the path of accumulation. So one continues with the the 4 applications of mindfulness and so forth, and further enhances those practices. And now we call the path of joining the 4 factors conducive to insight or to certainty. The path of accumulation is called conducive to merit. So from the 2 accumulations, the path of accumulation is conducive to to merit, and then the path of joining is what we call the factors conducive to insight. And so that leads then to the certainty of the path of seeing. So by furthering the qualities of the path of accumulation, one comes closer and closer to the path of seeing. And this happens actually also in 4 stages. These 4 factors conducive to insight, just as we have seen that the path of accumulation has a lesser, a middling, and greater path of accumulation, we can also divide the path of joining into several sections or several parts. So these are the 4 factors. The first one is heat, the second one is summit, the third one is acceptance, and the fourth one is supreme attribute. And so the first one is called heat because it's the first time that one gets a first taste for the direct realization of suchness. That means that when we, for example, approach a fire, then even from far away, there's a point when we first experience the heat of the fire, so we can feel the warmth, and then the closer we get, the more of the heat we experience. And so the closer we come to the path of seeing, also the power of that is radiating out, or we can experience the warmth of the path of seeing already as we approach it on the path of joining.
The trading kabla chö tamje teni simgi nangzam ji remadobi mone jena chiro la rangshin dubaji da midowas ina simgi nangni dati da thonga redo sambegi tindigi tene ji thonglam yishe gi me tawde thongela ta me barela tamungela ji chapter party kabla ta godambo me mabar ngola khoni thuk jodi kala chapter de kupa de dang chapter gi phai shini de thuk di kala dheji le an tin me bar ngira on din shin shin de daw de res chö thamje 인주 칠로라 랑신 두바데 마레도테 이나 셈게 왕게 낭잠레도 선배 딘디기 하고위고네 치료를 된 탐제 숭화든 저 탐제 치료를 랑신메 바오 딘데스나 하고위 띵인 젠당 시랍 총딩기 메지 저동시 바르게레 숭화네디 트디 갑들라
Oh, there was one thing that I forgot to mention in the previous section, and that is that so through the many practices of the path of accumulation, then on the path of joining, one actually develops a true understanding of the nature of the abiding mode of the Four Noble Truths, not only in terms of wisdom, but by relying both on meditative concentration, being able to one-pointedly rest the mind on that meaning, and then also wisdom of knowing the nature of the Four Noble Truths. So here one practices both meditative absorption and wisdom together. And so when we now talk about the factor of heat, the section of the path of joining that's called heat. Heat means to attain the warmth of the flame-like wisdom of the path of seeing by possessing the concentration concurrent with the discriminating knowledge that individually sheds light on the four truths. So at the path of joining, or the stage of heat on the path of joining, one is able to apprehend, to understand, even though one doesn't have the direct realization of it yet, one has the clear understanding of all phenomena to be mere appearances. So one knows that phenomena are not established in the way that they appear as outer phenomena. And so that describes the precursor to a flame actually igniting. So when we are lighting a fire and we have matches, first, before the match goes up into flames, before the match ignites, there's a very intense heat of the rubbing of the match on the matchbox, right? So it's the heat that comes before the flame actually ignites. And so even though there's no fire yet, it's the heat that precurses it. And so the same holds true for here. It's this like understanding of the stage of warmth that is the precursor to the direct realization of non-duality or of emptiness then later. And so that is practiced by focusing on both wisdom as well as meditative concentration.
Ne zemo ne se nipa jolam ge zemo de ne demba shege ne lu namla tene chilo la sungarang shime ba semge nang sam yimba de la tene jundu chebi ko ne gongpel do drobe se da ya gongpel do droba la tene chebe se tene jundu zambe ko ne jundu shukchumbo chine tene dingyen zin kom tene sherab dang roba chebi ko ne se 미tun초 세디가라 다치로라 수다 티로렉자 숭화된조 여사레 삼네 딜라 데네 잔년 도차 공도 나잘라 소보단다 나조 야간의 마무시에 바데오 잔년다 년년 미tun초 된조 계자 유어와르 제게 된조 레비레베스는 된조 왕라 메도바치네 세 데네 디 녀몽바 된조레 짱 쩨모르 줄바스는 녀몽바 된조 갈루송와 녀몽바 된조 왕도 마도바체 수소 그네 치로게 율기 왕도 마도네 소소 녀몽베 왕도라 마도네 소소 데 띵에진 강델라 네 토와 된데 준비를 쩨모르 줄바오
Summit means to possess the concentration concurrent with discriminating knowledge that expands the light on the four truths. Thus, it is the pinnacle amid virtue's roots that can vacillate due to discordant factors. So when we talk about the summit stage, then that means that, again, the understanding of the Four Noble Truths improves. First of all, the understanding of the heat stage, that phenomena that appear as outer phenomena are just mere appearances as such, increases. And so as one diligently engages in one's understanding of the nature of the Four Noble Truths in that way, then one really focuses on meditative concentration, and that then aids the improved understanding or one's wisdom. So when one understands that the outer phenomena that appear, that we usually hold on to as being existent outer objects, like sound, like form, sound, smell, taste, tangible objects, that they are mere appearances within the mind, or that just appear as such, then the many disturbing emotions that usually follow the experience of those different objects will not have the power to keep us entrapped anymore. So these non-conducive circumstances of the afflictive emotions, the disturbing emotions, will not have the power anymore, and we will not follow them. And so we're not following up on all the different sense objects, form, sound, and so forth that we might encounter, but instead we can remain within the meditative concentration.
대소 왕봉아 중오스 디류갑라 대바 준주 덴바 띵진 셰랍스 오디 딘조 데네 왕봉아스 대소 왕봉아스 오딘조리 네 왕봉아 기냠네 요레 송아레 데디 덴바시 네루라 대바 덴바시 네루라 준주 덴바시 네루칸라 덴바 덴바시기 넬룩딜레 마양와치네 띵에제 덴바시기 넬룩데 하고위기 셰바 셰랍스네 데네 덴종가델라데네 강삽삽치비고네 남기 요발라데네 덴 데소 왕봉아스 중모스
And at the time of these two, heat and summit, the five ruling faculties of faith and so forth that govern perfection will occur. So during the two stages of the path of joining, the heat and summit stage, we talk about the five faculties, the five governing faculties that we saw before of faith, diligence, mindfulness, meditative absorption, and wisdom. So that refers back to the faculties. So during the stages of heat and summit, these five faculties occur in relation to the nature, the abiding mode of the Four Noble Truths. So there is one develops faith with regard to the Four Noble Truths, then one develops diligence in understanding and practicing the Four Noble Truths. One practices mindfulness, so not forgetting the nature of the Four Noble Truths, and then one focuses on the Four Noble Truths in meditative absorption, or the meaning of the Four Noble Truths and meditative absorption, and then one develops the wisdom, which is the knowing, the discriminative knowledge of the nature of the Four Noble Truths. So on these two stages of the path of joining, we speak about the five faculties.
덴베 제수 팀베 쇠바네스 아니 다 쇠바디 톱나 아니 통람 체딜람 하도나야 체치마 아니 통람 톱에 인 샥샥라고 탁출사레 송아레 데임데 덴베 제수 팀베 쇠바네스 아니 덴바 남게 촉직라 단 덴바시기 넬룩 낭네 촉직라 숭와데 치료게 나와도 탐제 안에 nang zam ma do be sem gi wang ge na ma do chilo rang shin du ba me sam be de chok chik ji dan da sung rang shin me ba chok chik di la shuk chi de che su sung wi ding ye zen dan she rap chung bar den ba de su su ge wo yin yang chön ni ge dön la 디 송아랑신 메바르 똑비기 띵에 된다 시랍 총딩 덴비고네 데 소소교 인장 낭 셈당 낭기 류장 데네 7월 디기 낭와데다 랑신 메바 디 졸람 드 제모갑라 망고 곰곰 얘기 다 졸람 서바토비 갑데라 7월기 ngobo sungwa rangshi meba tsam masebeki nangi lüdang semkyang rangshi meba yinbagi chunyi ge dönla se dönji tsulge lekbar kongdo chupawo.
So then we move on to the next stage, which is the stage of acceptance. Acceptance that conforms to the truth means to possess the concentration concurrent with discriminating knowledge, which engages uniformly in the four truths and is in conformity with them. Although one is still an ordinary person, one fully comprehends the nature of things in the form of a mental image. So when one has reached the level of acceptance, actually one comes very close to the realization of the path of seeing. Actually, at that point, it is sure that one, at least in one's next life, so longest in one lifetime, one will gain the path of seeing. So this is already definitive. And so here now, one again observes the nature, or when one has an increasing level of understanding of the Four Noble Truths by practicing meditative concentration and wisdom, discriminating knowledge. And so previously we have said that the object of one's understanding is the fact that outer phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear, that the outer world, the environment, is just an appearance within the mind, not existing outside in the way that we think it does. So one has already gained an understanding of the non-existent, of the apprehended, of the perceived. And now, even though one is still an ordinary being on the path of joining at the level of acceptance, still one also gains an understanding in form of a mental image, so an intellectual understanding of the fact that also the apprehender, so the inner aspects, meaning one's body and mind as the apprehending aspects, they are also not established with their own nature. So not only are outer objects not existing in the way that we grasp to them usually, the same holds true also for the apprehender, the inner aspects. And so, and this is how one fully comprehends this at the level of the path of acceptance on the path of joining.
최초네 소소 랑기 셰베 덴반남라 미 단다 디갑라 디게 ngalokdelarawa soba kabla tene donji chulji 디델라 소소랑기 셰베 donji chul도 덴바시긴nel로 donji chul도라 안에 덴반남라 소소 랑게 덴바남 넬룩데 셰베스 데마 타베 띵엔젠 셰라단 총바르 덴바지기 랑신지 레스 디디 통람게 나록스 통람게 나록 데마타 임베 대단 예와오스 다 통남 톱조 갑기 딘데지레스 딘네 직딘비 추기 나나 촉도 주르바 데스 다 직딘비기 다 가나 촉람다 조람 탐제가 나네 최초도 주르바다 근데 한다 이제 통남 톱조 요발 때는 직딘비 추기 나네 촉도 주르바 데스 대제도도 팍비사 통남 중교레스 아니 서바단 초존이나 왕봉아 미팅비초 미지비지 톱수 유라에베나 안디 나우디 명라 톱나스네 라피유스 다지 디레도 단다 저단 제모갑라 단다 디 나우델라 대바 준주 템바 딘제 시랍 나우델라 왕봉아 나비라 단다 디디갑델라다 템바데 톱치루 준주당 딩진당 시랍 탐제베 톱침본예도다 추니게 된다 살도 줘도다 치수마자마마 능진바데 랑시메바 딘데 톱투발레면 톱치루 줘발라 딘데 딩아우데 냠네 여데 디 밍라이나양 톱나스나비레 톱수주와 여도스
So, and then we have reached the supreme attribute. The supreme attribute is to possess through individual cognizance, the concentration concurrent with discriminating knowledge that immediately precedes the Four Truths. It verges on the threshold of the path of seeing since it immediately precedes it. This is supreme among the mundane attributes because the noble stage, the path of seeing, occurs after it. So the supreme attribute is then a continuation of the correct understanding of the nature of things, the nature of the Four Noble Truths on the level of acceptance. We said that there, on the level of acceptance, one develops a full comprehending of the nature of the Four Noble Truths in truths individually in form of a mental image. Now, the supreme attribute is a continuation of that, and to the point that it is the point of vergence to the path of seeing. So we call it supreme attribute because it's the immediately preceding condition or the immediate preceding stage, which is really the point where it flips, where one then afterwards has the direct insight in the nature of the Four Noble Truths on the path of seeing. So because it is the very final last aspect before the truth of the Four Noble Truths, the meaning of the Four Noble Truths is directly perceived, then it is called a supreme attribute, because it's what comes directly before it, what directly precedes the path of seeing. And so it's really this understanding or the knowledge of the nature of the Four Noble Truths based on meditative concentration and discriminating wisdom that precedes then the direct insight. And during acceptance and supreme attribute, the five ruling faculties become the five powers, unassailable by discordant factors. So because one develops such a stronger power of insight, such the discriminating wisdom in league with the meditative concentration and the emerging further and further knowledge of the nature of the Four Noble Truths, the nature of phenomena, then through that power, actually the five powers emerge, which are the same practices as the five faculties. We still speak about faith, mindfulness, I forgot one. Diligence, attention, and discernment. No. No. Well, the five. Faith, diligence, mindfulness, concentration, and discriminating knowledge. So these five faculties are still the same faculties, the same practices, but because they become so powerful that they can't be overturned by or overwhelmed by the discordant factors anymore, due to the gained insight, the gained level of understanding on the two aspects of the path of joining, acceptance, and a supreme attribute. Here, at that point, they're then called the powers.
상매 교육이 차대 남게 챙이 레스 ane 드링 dane 상매 교육이 차대 남게 챙이 드네 람nga nane choglam dan jolam ni songare choglam la choglam chumu ane ding chimbos tidu gamla temma nyamar shabashi choglam chumu gamla denaje ding gamla yangda pongwashi chimbo gamla zuruye gambashi dene jolam de la yang nangse energy de zemo seba chujos dene de dan zemo ni kaptela wangbo nga la beus konjo ngai mingla ane yang seba dan chujo kaptela ane konjo ngai mingdela top la beus deba 준주 젬바 딘진 시랍 딩아우데 우드네슨 침바에 단도로 참샤인 모함은 쉐이.
So that then concludes the discussion of the two lower paths, which are the defiled paths of ordinary sentient beings. And so we have now seen actually that after that point, then actually views that cut the roots of virtue will never occur again. So the discordant factors, the defilements will be cut through. And so what we have seen today then is actually the truth of the path, which is explained in terms of the five paths. We have seen that there are five paths. And we have seen the essence of what the truth of the path actually refers to, then the divisions of the five paths. And in the five paths, we spoke about the path of accumulation, the fact that there are three stages on the lesser path on trains in the four applications of mindfulness, then in the four correct endeavors, and finally in the four legs of miracles. All that after we discussed the causes for the path of accumulation, and then from the path of accumulation we moved on to the path of joining, and we discussed the four stages on the path of joining, or the four factors conducive to insight that describe the path of joining, which are heat, summit, acceptance, and supreme attribute. And we've also seen that while we speak about the four faculties on the stages of heat and summit, because of the power of the antidote, the wisdom that arises, then on the later stages on acceptance and supreme attribute, we talk about the five powers. So this is all that we have been discussing today, and I would like to stop here for today, and we can recite the dedication and aspiration prayers together.
Ngoen chambala pawe chidara kempa dang kundu sangpo de yang de shen de dai gunji che sun dar lon chen ke wan de da tam je ram tu ngon du sum shen pen gyal wan tam je je ngo wai kan la chondo ngamba de dage kewe zawa de gun yang sangbo je shir ramdo ngo wara je sunam de ye tamje se pa ni tomne nyebe Chanam pamche ne jenga na che balav chupa ye sebe chole jowan jolon war shon ke wan di ye wo kun sunam ye she cho zo xing sunam ye she le jong wa tamba gu ne to ba sho lo che su zhou wa rai qian jie lam du su lo che lam du zhou wa rai qian jie lam du su lam chu lu wa sen lu wa rai qian jie lam du su chu lu wa ye shi su cha lu wa rai qian jie lam du su lo la su che la jian yong
So, Jelly. Okay, for you guys also, Jela Jeon. I see you all later in review class.
Thank you, Winka.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.